Okay, good evening. Oh, that was loud. Good evening, members. Any members of the public listening in and anybody else. Welcome to the 3rd of June Overhead Scrutiny Committee meeting held here at the Bexhill Town Hall in the Council Chamber. First things first, you'll see we have Lisa this evening. Louise is unavailable because it's her birthday. So she's going out. I expect she's probably listening online while she's eating a fancy meal just to make sure everything's done correctly. But we can say best wishes to Louise. I have no idea how old she is. You don't ask a lady her age. So yeah, probably about 34 or something. Maybe less. I'll stop before I dig a hole. So minutes. Do I have your authorisation to chair the committee to sign the minutes of the meetings of this committee held on the 22nd of April and the 20th of May as a correct record of those proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you very much. Apologies and substitutions. We have Councillor Byrne has apologised and she is substituted by Councillor Gray. And I have apologies from Councillors in the numerical Barnes, Mary and John, and Councillor Maynard. And Councillor Thomas has indicated that he's travelling from somewhere far away like Lewis and will attempt to get here, but maybe late. We probably will be late now because we started. So I think that covers us all off. Additional agenda items, there are none. Disclosure of interest and dispensations, I would probably, looking at it, say there's probably none, but if anything comes up that oh, Councillor Byrne.
Given the performance indicators and all, we seem to be covering everything. I'm a member of Bexhill Town Council, so I think that's probably a disclosure I need to make.
Okay. Any others? Nope. Item 5, performance report, 4th quarter, 23-24, January to March of 2024. What have we got? Monitor the delivery of the Council's key performance indicators. Recommendations resolved that this committee consider these findings and recommend any actions to Cabinet as necessary. So, Anna, over to you.
Thank you very much. It's nice to see everybody. Can everyone hear me okay and online? Yeah, that's good. So I'm delighted to present the performance report for the 4th and the final quarter for 23-24. As you will see from the report, everything is going very well. There's lots of greens across the board, and where there are a couple of ambers, they tend to be quite marginal. So Deborah's just pointed out to me that one of hers is very marginal if you look at the end of the year rather than quarter 4. As you know, what we do with this report is we report by exception. So if the performance is either significantly over or under the target, I include a narrative in the report. So my laptop has just gone on standby, so just 1 second. The first one that we've got, which is an exception, is the FOI requests. Our current target is to achieve 95% in 20 working days, and you'll see that we're a bit below target. However, you'll see from the narrative that Mark has provided that although we're outside of that target, we did actually adhere to all of our legal requirements by requesting an extension. Would you like me to take questions as we go along, or I'm happy to do it either way?
Yeah, I think, yeah, should we do that? Should we ask a question as we take each one? We were sort of just thinking about this, the freedom of information requests, and there's there's quite a rise. And you'd like to think that it's not that we're doing things badly and everybody wants to just ask more questions. But you mentioned at my briefing last week there's a number of freedom of information requests come from people studying at university. So it's easier to swing off an email to half a dozen councils asking specific questions. Have you got any numbers on those?
I haven't got the numbers on the ones that are people that are researching from university, but I did get some information from Mark that showed we had 93 different categories of freedom of information requests in the last quarter, and they can be anything from, actually I've got them in front of me, so I won't read out all 93, you'll be pleased to hear, but they range from social and council housing to COVID marshals to apprenticeship levies to pay scales. It could be, you know, so many weird and wonderful things that quite a lot of these will be people doing research and stuff like that. One of the things that I've put in the narrative is that we're trying to improve the process by putting more information on the website. So if we do get people wanting information, hopefully they can go to the website and see that the information is already there. So we're going to get better at that over the coming months and put more on. But I think just by highlighting the fact that there are 93 different types of FOI requests with those different subject matters, you can see how vast it is and how wide-ranging.
Yeah, because obviously you've got that sort of spread of question. You haven't got one or two people who would know that level of knowledge. Well, maybe there is a special person somewhere who knows 97 different elements of the council, but it's blooming awkward, I would think, and very time consuming. We sort of, I would sort of say, I suppose legally you're not allowed to, ask where people come from, because if you said, well, if you're a Rother resident, then I won't charge you, but if you're from Durham and you're doing a university course and you're costing us time and money and effort, then surely you can pay for it. But I don't think that's legal, is it?
No, Lorna's shaking. Oh, I seem really loud. I'll go back a bit. Lorna's shaking her head on that. And also, it doesn't really matter the reason why people ask for an FOI request. It's just their right to be able to do it.
Thank you. Last time you talked about this, we did say how many of these FOIs were repeat FOIs. And if many of them are, do we have a kind of vexatious policy whereby you could say to somebody, we've spent this amount of time on this, you're clearly not getting the answer you're looking for. We have not got that information. So, we're going to have to close this freedom of information request?
Yeah, from memory, last time I think the answer was about 26 were repeat ones, but I can clarify that. And I'm not sure if we have a vexation. Yeah, Lorna's nodding.
We do have a vexatious policy, which isn't just around FOI. It's around people that are constantly contacting the council with repeated requests. I think if it has been asked before, there's something about publishing the outcome of FOIs and letting people know online where to find that, and that has to be a more efficient way of working. But sometimes they're subtly different, But I think actually that's where we can actually save ourselves an awful lot of time and effort.
Sorry, just to clarify, when I said repeated, I meant, so does Mr. X write to 25 of his friends and say, let's all write to the council, but also does Mr. X or Mrs. X, keep writing to you again and again and again for more information? So, is that, because that is vexatious?
Yeah, we do have those, and I think last time it was about 26, but I'll check. But that's some FOIs from the same person.
Do we put the answers on? Lorna's just sort of touched on it, but do we put the question and the answer on the website?
Yes, we do, but hand on heart, it's not that easy to find. So I think we need to do a bit more to make it easy to find for everybody.
Yeah, might be whether it fends anybody off or not, I don't know. It might be just interesting for people who actually, if you're that way inclined, want to search for some random question and a random answer, then might be interesting. Do you want to... who we got? Terry?
Thanks, Paul. And of course mine isn't. Yes, do we look at the areas that people seem to want more information on and use that to maybe educate the AMI system so there is a flow there? Okay.
Yes, I believe we do. And Mark has come up with a pie chart and it shows categories as well. So we do get quite a lot about council tax and things like that.
Simon?
Yeah, I was just going to question the vexatious reference to my hometown of Durham, Chair, but that's okay. Well, I'm happy to move on.
It was a random place. Put me off now. Right, Anna, the next one.
So the next one is the number of telephone calls answered by customer services. And this is one where we're just looking for a channel shift and a reduction of calls to be presented. However, if you see from the narrative, we actually have more calls received in quarter 4 compared with quarter 4 last year. So we had 8% more calls presented. However, we did have an increase in the number of calls answered from 69% to 77%. And we also had less calls abandoned, which is good. So it's good in terms that we're answering more calls, but it isn't reflecting the channel shift towards the digital offer that we would like. Okay for me to move on?
No questions on that one, I don't think.
Just quickly, if I may. At the Digital Transformation Task and Finish group, one thing that came up was we don't shout out about our successes enough. And maybe we should be putting that on the website. Our average call time in the last 3 months has been 4 minutes 23. I think that would, it could really impress people. It could encourage people. Or it could make people who are waiting on the phone for 6 minutes and 43, it could make them really angry. But I think we don't blow our own trumpet enough. And I think we should.
Yeah, and I think the amount of calls just is... The mind boggles, doesn't it? It's one every year. If you work it out over the course of the year, it must be one every 2 minutes or something ridiculous, isn't it? Which is a lot. So, but there it is. That's what we're for. Carry on, Anna.
So the next one is a good exception. Again, this is the average call wait time. And I note your comments about publicising more of the things that are going really well. The average call wait time for this quarter is much better in comparison to last year. So it's 4 minutes and 23 seconds compared with 10 minutes and 56. So that's really good. Are you okay for me to move on? So the next one is another good one, and I've got Deborah sitting next to me. So this is the missed bins per 100,000. Performance is really very good. The target is 62 and the quarter 4 performance is 38. So I don't know if there's anything you want to say, Deborah?
Just to thank the contractor, really, for providing a very good service. And I think we all reflect on previous service levels and are very happy that we're achieving this. So thank you.
Yep, I think we should echo that as members because, I can't remember, to be honest, I can't remember the last time I had a phone call or an email about missed bins or waste collections or anything. It's years. So as long may it continue. Thank you.
So the next one is the percentage of public land found with unacceptable levels of litter when surveyed. So the quarter 4 performance was slightly below where we would like it to be, but over the year it's where we would like it to be if you look at the whole year. I think you've spoken to Biffa, haven't you, and just reminded them of the need to make sure that everything is up to standard. I'll carry on. Again, the next one is a success story. It's the number of households either prevented from homelessness or relieved from homelessness. And as you can see, there's been a big increase in successful homelessness preventions and relief. It's 54% higher when compared to the previous year. And, it's 205 preventions compared to 133.
Yeah, can I quickly just mention the fly tips? We've buzzed over the fly tips. I would say that if I've ever reported a fly tip, they are cleared extremely quickly. They're really, really good. So I think it's just worth mentioning. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I was looking at the number of cases where you've been able to prevent homelessness. I mean, you can't calculate it, but the money is saved to be able to do that is phenomenal, because although we've got a figure for what it does cost for temporary accommodation, at the moment private housing costs continue to rise, so our placements are costing more as well, and it can vary. I mean, I dealt with a case recently where somebody in temporary accommodation out of the district at £2,000 a month. We've now got them housing social housing for £535. It's a massive. So you can't equate the figure, but it must be quite a lot of money that we're saving for every family that we do prevent from being homeless. So I know this policy goes back a few years. It did under Martin Bolton, and it's a very important part of our scheme of things, I think.
Yeah, sorry.
I just wanted to pick up on that as well. I absolutely agree with Councillor Clark, Councillor Clark's comments there. And but it's the human impact as well. You know, preventing homelessness and getting upstream of those issues is just so important. I think. I mean, 54% is a real, something to really shout about and celebrate. And have those two homelessness prevention officers in place is something I think we really should be, so proud of, and the fact that they're having such an impact is that worthy of a press release, along with every other, with some of the other stories that we've got to tell. But I think that in particular, in the current climate, is really something we should be, celebrating and shouting about.
Cabinet Member for Housing, Rory.
Thank you, Chair. Just to echo what Sai has just said there, if we are to issue a press release, we should also mention that we are investing an extra 12 million in buying, hopefully, another 50 units of accommodation, which again will have a dramatic effect on the bottom line of our budgets in terms of temporary accommodation. So it's pretty good news, I would say, and yes, perhaps we should be singing it from the rooftops. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I ask a really dumb question? The average cost of placing household in temporary accommodation, I'm assuming that's per month, or is it per week?
I think it's per month.
That's what I was hoping.
Yeah. And I will take an action point to investigate the press release as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Terry?
I think it's worth saying that, we've taken on 2 more people in the homelessness prevention team, and we say this as if homelessness prevention, you do this, you do that. It's very much customer driven, and by increasing the team, we have enough people to actually look in depth at the reasons and come up with it. We have multiple solutions, and everyone who works in housing and in homelessness prevention has really good contacts within the town, within agencies, with landlords, which this all feeds into the success story. So we didn't just buy accommodation and it made it okay. It was a very central plank, but it was a central plank in a platform of an all-round approach. And I think that stemmed initially from Joe, and he's had very good support from all of his team and other departments. So hopefully we'll carry on with that. And I think I'm right in saying that we are taking the lead in quite a few county-wide initiatives who are learning from what we've done. So, as you say, it's a very good news story.
Okay, I'll go on to the summary comparison very quickly for the end of the year, because this encompasses paragraph 16 on the revenue and benefits, average calendar days to process a change to an existing housing benefit claim. So where possible, I've just put a summary where we can compare the KPIs from this year to last year. We couldn't compare them all because they're not the same KPIs, but there are a few areas where I could compare them. So the first two are about revenues and benefits. So the first one is council tax collection rates. So for 22-23, the annual average was 97.66, and this year it's 97.55, so it's very, very similar. The business rate collection rates, it's 97.83 in the, hang on, which year is that? Average was 97.83 compared to the annual average of 96.70. So again, it's only a very slight decrease in performance, but it's quite comparable, really. And if anyone's got any questions, Chris is on the line to answer them. But they have faced some staffing challenges this year, and we're putting more resilience into the team. But I think they've done an amazing job with the resources that they've got.
Yeah, Chris, if you're online, do you anything you want to say?
There's nothing really further to add than what Anna's just said, really. Yeah, the collections are very similar to previous years. I think they are down slightly. I think that's understandable with the current climate. But yeah, I think as Anna said, I think the team's done brilliantly considering the resource issues we have experienced to maintain the levels of performance that they have.
That's good. Thank you very much. Any questions, anybody? Vicky?
I just wondered, Chris, has there been any fallback for the people who have gone on to zero council tax?
This very loud there. Sorry. This is obviously Q4, so this is before the new council tax reduction scheme came in from the 1st of April. So the figures at Q1 should give us a better picture of how the new council tax reduction scheme has affected the collection.
Thank you. Yes, my mistake.
Thank you. And have we got any update on the brown waste bins? That's Deborah. Is this part of this? Yeah, I've mentioned that. Now, I made a note. Can I ask Deborah? Have we got? Because that's obviously a budget-related thing. Is that so? We're not.
I think you might be mentioning it in relation to the telephone calls received. Yeah.
Core performance report. Oh God. Housing annual work programme. Yeah, we were wondering about subscriptions on how that goes into this. I don't know, but whether that might that flag if the sort of number of subscriptions goes down, that might flag a issue with income. So have we got anything on that so far? Okay.
We're in the renewal process at the moment. The actual start of the subscription year is the 15th of July. So we're literally just taking the first direct debits of those who've already applied. We have had quite a few cancellations, but that's nothing unusual at this time of year. People moving, leaving. We've also had people coming on. The cancellations to date have been higher than previously, but not at this moment in time outstandingly high. But then we find people come back on again later in the year because you can join the subscription service at any time. So it's really, in the past, it's proven to be swings and roundabouts. So it's really too early to give a clearer picture than that at the moment, I'm afraid.
Okay, yeah, I just think sort of going forward, maybe well, it'll probably come up in a budget report, won't it? If there's a big hole, but we can see swings and roundabouts. Yep.
Sorry, I should add that we'll probably have a clearer indication in end of August. That far off, really, might help.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. You about there, Anna? Nearly.
I'm pretty much there. I think under the rest of the summary I've covered everything. There's only one other thing, which is income from all assets went up for this year, and we're hoping that will increase further when we do the strategic asset management review during this financial year.
I think Andrew would agree with that. Deborah, you want to come back?
Thank you. Would you mind if I just took us all back to the fly tips? Just a reminder, really, to think about the fact that we closed all the Bring sites and we weren't sure what impact that would have on fly tips. And it just shows you what a good result we've had to date, because they've gone down, they haven't gone up, which is quite remarkable. It was an interesting risk, but it's paid off. That's really good. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Everybody? Oh, Richard's here. Good, right, well then. So, resolve that this committee consider these findings, which we've done, and recommend any actions to Cabinet. I don't think there are any, are there? I think we're pretty happy as it is.
I'd just like to thank Anna for a really good, conclusive and clear report. It's been very helpful, thank you. And I pass the recommendation.
So it's, moved by Councillor Cook, seconder, Polly Gray, thank you. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, Anna. Welcome, Councillor Thomas. That's all right. Next one. Item 6. What do we got? Present the state of the district report 2024. Resolve that this committee reviews and notes the state of the district report for 2024. Nicola, your bag, this one.
Thank you. Attached to Appendix A is lots of interesting facts and data drawn from several sources, which just gives an indication of actually what the district looks like at the moment on various aspects for like population, people, poverty and deprivation, personal well-being. It highlights strategic challenges across the district, as well as what we're doing well across the district. This will be used to be taken forward for the emerging corporate plan that's coming forward. So again, helping identify our challenges and our weaknesses and our strengths that we're going forward. Key information I've extracted in the report highlights. So it's about the average age of Rother has increased by 3 years over the last 10 years. The number of people aged 65 to 74 has risen as well. It's also important to note that the working age population is half of our district. So it isn't all over 65s, it is half of that. So we do need to ensure that we are targeting our services towards that 50% as well. We've got slightly more residents that are classed as disabled compared to the national average. Employment rates are generally good, but the salary is lower. Rother's average salary is £31,000, which is 17.5% lower than the average at 38,000, and the gap on that is increasing. 38% of the Rother's working age has a degree or higher, which is below the 43% for England. We've got lots of information there on our businesses as well. We've got information there about our housing. So we've got 73% are owner-occupied compared to 61% nationally. So again, that has challenges for the homelessness that we were talking about earlier on, with actually the sourcing of accommodation for people. So it does put pressure on affordable housing and also the use of temporary accommodation. The availability of broadband is seen stark improvements over the last few years, but it is still lower than what it is compared to national rates. So there's lots of information on there, facts and figures, things that could be drawn out. Is there anything else that you'd like to know or that you feel could be included? This information will be published on the website over the next month.
Thank you very much. Councillor McGurk, by a hand.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to wonder if there's a connection and just, express concern about the increase in carbon emissions, which are up 15%. And that's when we've got such a great climate strategy as a council, that's hopefully we'll see it, because I think that's for 2021, isn't it? So, hopefully that will be coming down. But I wonder, it makes me wonder about active travel, availability locally, the state of public transport, and also I wonder if there's a connection with, or there could be an increasing connection between that and the broadband availability. With, as you mentioned, gigabit availability is 52% compared to 75% nationally. During times, there are lots of sound effects tonight. I want to throw.
It's at the Westminster China.
Yeah, the Westminster China.
In which case it may be
Big bands
forecast of things to come.
So I'm just wondering these days, obviously, when we're all working from home, or many of us are working from home, and there's a relation between that and travel, it would be interesting to have some more detail on that, if there is any.
Do you get to that level of detail?
No. The next emissions is due out at the end of August, I think it is. I think it's presented to the Climate Change Steering Group in October. So at that point, we'll have to see what the latest data is. But with regards to looking at the trends and the correlations, it'd be something that would probably be beyond what we would be looking at.
Councillor Clark, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, there's a lot of very useful information in here, which is very good for points of reference to keep. One thing I would say is, maybe not all councillors are aware of it, but if you go on to East Sussex in figures, you can get massive information about your own particular ward, even about how many people work in your own houses, people have got qualifications. It's really, really useful, drill down information. I use it because I can use it for when I want to get some funding for certain groups, because I've got the figures of how many there is in a ward. And also highlight a lot of the work we're doing at East Sussex at the moment, because the number of people over 80 is going to rise by between 50 and 20% over the next decade. So there's a big issue there for, obviously, adult social care. And also, looking at the wider pictures, it also proves how important the anti-poverty working group was, because it highlights about deprivation in different wards and different parts of Rotherham, where the amount of people on benefits, or people don't own cars and have transport issues and that sort of thing, which we need to ground down on and continue to work and try and address those issues. So it's a very useful report. It's a very good reference. So thank you very much.
Councillor McGurk.
McCourt. Thank you, Chair. No, it is invaluable, this sort of information. I was just a couple of questions and a political observation, if I'm allowed to make that as well. You use the 2019 figures of the indices of multiple deprivation. I'm presuming that's the last, deep dive into it. Although, as Councillor Clark has said, the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment run by the county is a mine of information as well. Now, I was just looking at the map of deprivation across the district. Quite shocking, really. When I first came to live here just over 10 years ago, these areas were areas of entrenched poverty then. Sidley, Central, Rye and Eastern Rother. And, after 10 years of austerity, there's been absolutely no shift in the dial here. So I am hoping that when we have a Labour MP, Christine Bayliss, sitting next to me here, she will convene that anti-poverty group and a joined-up attempt at attempting to improve the situation. So all joking aside, it is a major issue. We've had generational poverty, which seems to be entrenched and doesn't seem to be going anywhere. And it is something that we need to do something about, because these are people's lives that are being wasted, and their health is suffering, and so on and so forth. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I sort of get a bit sort of confused, if you like. Sort of in my, I'm sort of told Eastern Rother is a lot of deprivation, but you see Canberra possibly. But we think there's 38% of all the properties in Canberra are second homes or holiday lets or Airbnbs. Similar goes for Winchelsea. A lot of Rye is now. You go into Iden, you can walk around Iden, and there's houses worth fortunes which are hardly ever lived in. Same in Peasmarsh and on the other fringes. So I don't get, maybe I'm looking at the wrong sort of side of it, but you just think, well, is there this massive level? When you've got so many second homes, I don't know. But then the trouble is, you get priced out of them yourself. You can't afford to live there. The question I've got on the average salary of 31,000 for Rother, is that sort of per adult, or is that sort of a household income? Do we have sort of an average household income? So that's sort of an adult. So you could potentially be double that, for argument's sake, if you like. But is there any way of getting a figure for a sort of average household income?
I'd have to have a look for you.
Yeah, if you could. You just sort of, when you see houses now that are, something comes up for sale and it's 350 grand for a 2-up, 2-down cottage, and you think, well, how do you afford that? When I bought my first house, it was 6,000 quid. There you go. Don't stand much chance. Councillor Bayliss, I will say no political statements, please.
No, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I was just going to comment on this this whole business around wage levels. I think our ex-MP now, Hugh Merriman, once pointed out to me that actually we have one of the lowest wage levels for jobs based in Rother in the entire country compared to house prices, and that I think points to the point that you're making, Councillor Osborne, and that gap between house prices, rents, and the low wage levels is what causes so much poverty and hardship for some of our poorest residents. I will say that because of that, one of our not key indicators, but one of our objectives has always been through our regeneration and economic development strategy has been to actually bring in quality jobs into the district. We know that if we can increase the number of jobs, like the hospital, for example, that's been built up in Old Town Ward, if we can increase the number of quality jobs, we're actually going to, improve that statistic. And it's something personally I want to be measured on, that we get, basically off the bottom of that scale and increase that.
Thank you. Anyone for any more? Councillor Byrne?
Thank you, Chair. I think the various points that have been raised indicate how important it is to look behind the statistics. We have an ageing demographic. which means a lot of people are going to work in the adult care industry, and this is always low paid. But do the care firms in Rother pay lower than average? I don't know. So just because we come low on average wage, does that necessarily mean we should be putting our efforts into any specific sector? Now, I totally agree with Councillor Bayliss that if we can move to change that, to move other industries in offering higher paid jobs, that will be wonderful. But I think we will always be weighted in any national league table by the number of people who will be working in adult social care. Thank you.
I suppose the other could be said of, we are sort of tourism dependent. And as I said, restaurant work, bar work, cleaning apartments and houses and everything else isn't the top grade of pay, is it? So you're sort of in that. You go up for something a week, it costs you a fortune, but the bloke serving you up doesn't get anything. So it's a difficult one because tourism has always been a low wage sort of economy, hasn't it, to a degree. But the trouble is, like in Rye and surrounding areas, the people who live there to service, work in the bars, work in the restaurants, and everything else, can hardly afford to live there now because they've been kicked out because it's better for the landlord to take £700 a week as opposed to £700 a month. State of affairs. Councillor McGurk.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, absolutely agree. And when you live in a town like Rye, or a small town, many of us do, it can be quite obvious who is the better employer and who is not the best employer, because the better employers, you go in and you see the same staff time after time, and they maintain their staff and they look after them, and we may know them personally, and we may know who is being looked after and who isn't. If you go into somewhere that doesn't pay well, that doesn't look after their staff, there's a churn, there's a turnaround, people don't stay, and people don't tend to live locally. And so in that sense, it can be fairly visible. And if you choose to spend your money in with a business that does pay well and that does treat staff well, then for me that's really important. And it's one small way of supporting decent employment practices. I think with the care industry, like Councillor Byrne was talking about earlier on, that's less visible because you only come into contact with that either, when you're getting on a bit, or you are needing some support in your home for whatever reason, or if a family member or a friend is relying on that care. And that's when you come across it and you realise the issues. And I think it's really important for us because actually there is a sense that we could be part of a joined-up approach to training and valuing our social care workforce who do looking back at COVID, when people were working, they were pretty much one of the only workforces of people who were going into people's houses when they were poorly and sick, putting their own health at risk, and sometimes actually dying. And I've worked with people who did lose their lives through COVID, who were going in to people's homes during that time. And they really deserve our recognition and support. And the only real way to show our recognition and support is by paying them properly and training them properly. And at a county level, that we can influence that at a county level. Talk about adult social care, because if we have, and obviously budgets are tight and we have very little manoeuvre and room to move on what we pay domiciliary care agencies, but we can recognise and incentivise agencies that have decent employment practices and decent pay for their staff, and who aren't taking profits offshore like some of the very large agencies do. There are ways of building into commissioning models, supporting agencies that do pay staff properly, and sometimes the better agencies actually employ a sort of a John Lewis model where the staff share in profit and are paid properly and receive recognition. And if we were part of a partnership, for instance, where I think I'm probably going beyond the bounds of overview and scrutiny now, to be honest, yeah. But if we were to look at something like a partnership around training, apprenticeships, and really support, when the opportunity arises, for, how to develop the kind of well-paid jobs that Councillor Bayliss was mentioning in care, this has to be something which, hopefully we can support and use some of this data to support if we did take that position in future. But for me, it's something which is very close to my heart, and I think it's just absolutely vital that we do that and take any opportunity that it may arise to work with other districts and boroughs and especially county to support that agenda.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I agree very much with what Councillor Bayliss had to say about the importance of the highly professional jobs that will be available at the new mental health hospital, and I also agree with Councillor McGurk about the importance of paying people in social care a proper wage. It's going to be very, very key. One of the most telling statistics, I think, in the report is the increase of 3 years in the average age of the population. If you compare that with Eastbourne, which is a place that had a very similar reputation to Bexhill some 20 years ago, the average age in Eastbourne has declined in the last 20 years from 78 to 45. A stunning change, whereas our average age has increased. And I think that's a very important point, because it's because of that increase in the average age that we had such a heavy dependency upon the care industry. But I think we might be able to learn some lessons from Eastbourne about how they've been able to achieve this. And that's by putting a very strong emphasis upon the cultural offer, which is a growing strength of this town, and the entertainment offer there. And they've had enormous success in all the different things they've done to draw people into the town, who have consequently decided to settle in the town. We saw evidence of this. I saw evidence of the change in Bexhill just the other night with the Bex Fest. I was walking down Sackville Road, and suddenly here was Bexhill full of teenagers singing and dancing and laughing and joking in the streets. It was a completely different town from the town that we used to have. And if we can move more in that direction, we can start bringing in a more balanced demographic. I think that can make a big difference to the economic prospects of the town.
Councillor Clark.
I agree with Councillor Bayliss. I can remember years ago working with the regeneration department, and companies were coming down here looking to purchase premises and bring in some good, well-paid jobs, but they didn't like the infrastructure. There was lack of that very often stopped them coming here and moving. And something else that's not just here, but is depressing the local economy is we should get rid of 0-hour contracts for a start. That's something the government should do. And also allowing supermarkets and other shops to employ young people on so limited hours that they're not entitled to sick pay or holiday pay, this sort of thing. It's something that has to be addressed at a national level, but all that suppresses people's income and their ability to spend, So there are national issues involved as well as local. Thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this, Nicola. Lots of really interesting information. Page 55 is the one that worries me. The proportion of non-decent dwellings, it's 18.3% in Rother. That's really worrying, isn't it? People living in substandard accommodation, which is higher than the national average. Can we do anything about that?
So I've got different page numbers to you. Which?
Oh, it's page 55. It's where you've got
That'll be
the
your
pie
21.
charts.
That's something we probably have to look into. That's about the non-decent dwellings by 10 years. So the difference with the unoccupied. That's the information that we have got that's been supplied by Deluc. It's something we probably would need to look into. And it's similar with the fuel poverty as well. So again, it could be a symptom of where people are asset rich, cash poor. So there is lots of that within particular pockets within Rotherham as well, so it could be something to do with that. But it is something that is being looked into with funding that Environmental Health have got. So it is something that we can do something about as well. There's projects with East Sussex, Citizens Advice. They've got their fuel assessments project at the moment. That's going really, really well. So again, there's things that we are doing, which then hopefully will then have a knock-on effect on those bits.
Thanks, Nicola. Well, I think we've reviewed the notes of the state of the district. I think that's all we have to do, isn't it? Mm-hmm. We've reviewed it, we've looked at it, we've asked questions. Nicola's answered them as many as we can. Terry, one more?
Not so much a question, but it takes an inordinate amount of officer time to produce this. But I think the questions prove that it is all of interest, and it does relate to Rother as we see it. So it isn't a report that's gone off and had a life of its own. I must admit, one report I was regularly party to that had a life of its own was Southern Housing, which seemed to say 98% of this is good and 95% of that is bad, and I still had residents with their front doors hanging off and had been for 2 years. So this report seems to have a firm foundation in reality, which I think makes it worthwhile, the officers collating and presenting this information in such a particularly good way as they have. Not just this report, but all the reports at the moment. The level of information is not too much, and it really does enable us to take action. Thank you.
Chief Executive?
Yes, I just wanted to add to that. I think Nicola's done a great job in bringing this together. Of course, as a document, it's almost out of date as soon as you produce it. So keeping it up to date's going to be the trick, and we're looking at some digital ways of doing that. But I think it is what happens next with the data and how we use it, how it informs our strategies, our corporate plan, our economic development strategy, regeneration strategy, housing strategy, using this data to actually see what impact we're having and how we're affecting change. And that's really the evidence base for a lot of strategies that are coming forward. So I'm really pleased that we've gone. This is something we used to do quite a long time ago and haven't done for some years. So I'm really, really pleased that we've managed to bring this forward. And I know a lot of hard work went into it.
Again, do we put this on the website? Do we have a go on there?
It'll be on the website by the end of the month. I'm working with web team at the moment.
Cool, because that would be a reference point for people. But again, it's just information for anybody to have. Councillor Thomas.
Chair, can I just draw everyone's attention to what I thought were the most worrying of all the figures here, which is that we've got a very high percentage for intentional self-harm. It comes to 269.3 per 100,000, as against a regional figure of 197.5 and a national figure of 163.9. So we've got an extremely serious problem locally of intentional self-harm. And so I think, sort of following up on what Lorna Ford had to say, now we've got this sort of picture of what are the particular things that need a concentration upon. The next stage is to say, what strategy can we introduce to do something about them? That's the great merit of this. It's not just statistics for its own sake. It's statistics, as Lorna said, to inform policy.
Point. Is that Councillor McGurk?
Sorry, me again. Just thinking about what you were saying, Lorna, are there opportunities to engage, and we might already be doing it, with East Sussex College, for instance, to develop the opportunities for thinking about what workforce we need and the sort of quality that we like? Would there be opportunities to engage with colleges and employers to develop training opportunities and then maybe link with, I know commissioning is a county issue, but maybe there are forums where we can engage to push that agenda, more positive approaches to commissioning and valuing care workers?
I think, we can't do everything. you know, and we need to be really, really clear about that. But understanding and being an advocate for the issues in our district, every meeting we go to, if we're thinking about, actually, I really need to mention this one bit of data and make sure that it gets on somebody else's agenda. And sometimes there are projects that we can work together. You know, the town board is an interesting one. We can tackle things in a different way that perhaps we haven't worked together before. But I think it's spreading this message far and wide. What are the sort of issues for Rother? What are the things that really, really stand out? And just making sure that staff members, and we're all aware of what those issues are, and trying to get buy-in for our strategies as well, and make those shared priorities and working across the system. I know that's a bit of a, you know, it's an overused term, but it's so true, isn't it? So, yeah, absolutely.
Councillor Bavis?
Yes, I was just going to come back on that point. During the pandemic, our sort of catering hospitality industry obviously suffered quite a great deal. And when we started the economy coming back, there was a huge shortage of staff working in the hospitality. And to this day, some of our restaurants in Bexhill, for example, don't open 7 days a week anymore because they just can't get the staff. And I started an initiative around skills, cooking up community skills, and have been invited onto an East Sussex County Council skills training committee, which is where I'm able to sort of keep pressing that, you know, the point home about how do we improve the quality of the jobs involved in catering? Why is it seen as a sort of second-class sort of occupation, or for those? Why is it still, you know, people who sort of don't get A levels are seen to sort of go into that sort of industry? It should be open to all, and there should be routes in for people, irrespective of their of their sort of qualifications. So we're doing that in the catering and hospitality skills board. Now, I know that there is a social care equivalent committee. As I say, it's run by Sussex County Council. Councillor Clark is nodding at me, so he's obviously aware of it. So I do think there are opportunities to actually push this through, but you have to find the route. I mean, I just stumbled across it and was asked to go on it because I had raised it as a challenge for us.
Right. Oh, Councillor Clark, quick one.
I mean, because it's come up to us, in East Sussex we're working hard on promoting adult social care as a career. We have got officers going into college and also arranging work experience or days in various establishments. So this is something we had a subcommittee and was concerned about, that college students should understand the value of a wonderful career can be in adult social care. So we are...
Good. Right. Well, I suppose it's resolved that this committee reviews and notes the state of the district report. We've done that. Move that. Councillor Cook.
Happy to move that.
Councillor Gray. All in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Nicola, for the work you put in, and hopefully, you'll have to review it soon. keep it up to date. But no, thanks very much. That's very interesting. And for anybody watching it, it'll be on the website soon. So it'll be good, interesting stuff. Right, item 7. We've got an additional, well, it's not an additional one, but item 7 is the Housing Ombudsman's special report into Southern housing. Now, Joe's not here.
He's not. No.
So, and Joe asked for this to come on. So, I think the gist of what I've got is Southern Housing has had a review, Ombudsman review, which isn't favourable. and given that they're our largest social housing provider in the district, if not the whole of the southeast corner, where do we want to go with that? Do we want to drag someone down here and say, well, what gives? Do we want to sort of leave it with Rory to say, well, to you, Ben dear, and if you need our assistance, we drag him in here? It's a shame Joe's not here because he could have sort of told us what he wanted.
He did send me a note.
He did send you. You read it out.
It's not a very long note, but it is, as the chair describes, how do we want to handle this? Apparently, pre-2019, I think we did regularly have Southern Housing to Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Is that right? I wasn't here then, but Lisa will probably know. So it was a regular report, probably an annual report, I would have thought. And over time, that's not happening now. And really, is that something we want to resurrect? Joe's suggesting in his note that we invite Southern Housing along to the July Overview and Scrutiny Committee to present the report highlights and, crucially, how they are addressing these. And I think that would be a very useful discussion to have.
Rory, you're Cabinet Member for Housing.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it would be a very good idea to invite either the Chief Executive of Southern Housing, Paul Hackett, Vanessa Bittis, the Regional Director. I know that Doug, Councillor Oliver and Councillor Bayliss are meeting with them tomorrow. A meeting has been arranged at 12:30. Unfortunately, I can't attend as I'm working. I think I have a major problem with this. I have worked in housing, and in a previous life I was director of an LSVT, Large-Scale Voluntary Transfer Association. And even then, I could see the problems that were inherent in the fact that they often become remote from their customer base. They become quite aloof. And what we've seen with Southern Housing, because having lived in the district for over 10 years, they're originally Amicus Horizon, then Optivo, and now they're Southern. And these mergers, usually driven by economic necessity, but in truth, they're not really mergers, it's the wrong term. They're really takeovers of what are often failing housing associations. And this compounds the problem. And I think that's exactly what's happened with Southern. They've overreached themselves in terms of the merger. Size is an issue. I think 78,000 spread throughout the country is a massive ask in terms of trying to be remote and clued in with your customer delivery. But it's the lack of control and democratic accountability of these organisations as well. And if there is to be a Labour government, I'd like to see the regulatory powers of the social housing regulator considerably beefed up with teeth so that they can, if necessary, enforce the breakup of failing landlords. Because, as I said, 78,000 is just a massive monster organisation. Something has to be done about it. I would personally like to see a partial reverse stock transfer. I know that's probably not going to happen, but we can but dream. But back to the Ombudsman report, it's delineated that they were guilty of 92% maladministration, which is unbelievable. I've never come across that. So I think, and I'm sure Councillor Bayliss and Oliver will be holding them to account tomorrow, the Chief Executive, because something has to change. They're failing our residents, they're failing their own tenants, and we can't go on like this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bayliss, you rang me this morning and asked sort of to come in and speak to us. So I'll just remind you, no political stuff, but ward specific on your constituents' issues. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you, Councillor Osborne. I read the report. It's horrifying reading the Ombudsman report. The sort of mismatch and the way that the sort of complaint system, because it's basically looking at complaints that residents have raised, but the way that they're, it's sort of, if you were going to sum it up in a sort of one word, you'd sort of think to yourself, this is shambles. That there isn't anybody who's taking charge in some areas of the, that the Ombudsman found there was nobody in charge of the report. And then Councillor McCourt and I went to Thalia House to deal with a string of complaints that had been building up over a number of times. 6 pages just on one property. This is the response that Optivo sent us. Very defensive. We know that the Ombudsman report from the complaint in Councillor Clark's ward and Councillor Delaney's ward in Pebsham about a person, and you read that report. I mean, that's horrific. I know that the particular tenant there feels vindicated actually by this Ombudsman report. Actually demonstrates that she was really, really badly treated. These are our residents. These are people that live in our wards, and I know that other councillors have similar stories to tell. So I do believe that this committee is the right place actually for us to ask Southern Housing to come and present and to tell us exactly how they are going to sort out this complaint system and for once and for all. Any large organisation, it just fills me with horror really that they don't even see that actually complaints or having complaints, monitoring them, working out, you can get data, you can you can use that to inform your action plan about how you improve your organisational structure. There's none of that. And where people have multiple issues, so like with a plumbing problem, electrical problem, they're using different contractors, and so there's not one person who comes in who's sort of taking responsibility for sorting out what could be a complex case. Yes, I have picked up that if you've got one issue, they will respond. But as I say, when it goes wrong, it goes horribly wrong. I feel as a councillor that it's my duty to stand up and speak up for my residents. And I want to, I do want them to come and explain what they've done and what they're going to do to improve the system for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think when I was first elected, I'd spent 8 years on the original Rother Homes Board. It was a couple of years after the large-scale voluntary transfer. And during that time, we redeveloped many of there was a lot of old concrete houses. They were flattened and the places were sort of tidied up. More houses were built, including bungalows and all sorts, especially in Rye. And it was really good. Then I think it went, I can't remember who it went. There's so many sort of takeovers. I think it went Amicus, then it was Amicus Horizon, then it went Optivo, and now it's gone Summit, and they just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And you think, it wasn't really the best sometimes. Is it for the benefit of the residents? No, it's probably for the benefit of somebody else. Because, it's such a massive Leviathan almost now that, it's like talking to a bank. They don't know they shut a branch. They don't even know where the town is. Let alone they have a branch there. And, and I have issues in my own ward where we've got bungalows which were built for retirement people by this council back in the sort of late 70s, early 80s, which are now under the ownership of this group. And they sit empty for 2 or 3 years. And you get on, you think, and you finally get hold of something and say, well, why is it empty? Oh, they've gone into a nursing home. Yeah, and? Well, they might want it back. No. Sorry, nursing home is generally a one-way ticket. You go into a nursing home and you ain't coming out. So we're not going to leave your bungalow. It's not like going to a hospital for a new knee. If you get to the stage you need a nursing home, you don't need a bungalow just in case you get better. you're getting older, and I think that's the, and they might want it back. Well, no, but we've got 16, 17, 1,800 people on a waiting list. Get someone in there. Don't sit it empty in case poor Doris gets better, because she's 94 and she ain't going to get better. She needs looking after, and she'd be quite happy in her nursing home. She don't want a bungalow with Budleigh growing out the front path. So there it is. Right. So now we got to do is Councillor Cooper. Sorry, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. It was mentioned that there was regular reporting by the housing company, and I don't know what your definition of regular is, but you mentioned possibly yearly, and we are talking about residents who are weekly reporting to councillors about electrical, mould, damp, drip, whatever. And we have a yearly report from the housing company.
I think what I was talking about was a report to this committee. There is obviously lots of ongoing monitoring of Southern Housing and operational meetings that officers have with Southern Housing.
This is specifically Southern Housing.
Yeah. So, but what would be a proportionate? I mean, it might be that you want to monitor certain aspects of how they're getting on with the delivery of the action plan that's come out of this report. That might be something that you want to look at on a more frequent basis. But I think the question I was posing, what would be the fact that we don't do it anymore, is that something that we want to address, and we can have a more sort of formal way of actually this committee holding Southern Housing to account? That's really what I was saying, but obviously there's ongoing monitoring of the situation.
Does that answer your question, Beverly? Probably not.
Not specifically, no.
No, I think the awkwardness is that I know, us dragging in someone to give them a grilling is not going to get someone's dripping tap fixed, is it?
No.
That's their management or lack of management, which is the issue. So I'm sort of getting the feeling that we want someone in. We'll go from there. I've got a couple of hands up, 3, 4, 5. I'll take the table first, and then I'll go over to the... right, who was first? Let's go, Cheryl.
Right, before I retired, I worked for Orbit Housing Association, and I worked right across this district, and I went into all sorts of homes when people were changing, and the Optivo that was, the Southern that is, was an absolute shambles. Since I have been on the district council, I have been to homes where there is sewage running through the properties, and they don't move the people out. I had a family with 3 school-aged children who were living in a ground floor flat that had been flooded with sewage, and they wouldn't move them. It was absolutely appalling. We tried, even the MP tried to get them some help. I walk round Tilling Green at times, and I will have a look, and there'll be lots of homes that are empty, a bit like you're saying where you are. So these people are not doing their job. They're not communicating with the community. We have very many vulnerable people, whether it's financially or otherwise, in social housing. And so, therefore, it is the responsibility of the social housing provider to make sure they get it right. And these folks are definitely not. And I've witnessed it. And I also had the pleasure of waiting for 3 hours for a meeting that was supposed to be at Tilling Green, and the bloody woman never even turned up and never even contacted me. When I came back to them, I just got ignored. I was absolutely hopping mad. And when I used to do this sort of thing, that never happened. They need to have a maintenance team that actually works and monitors what's going on, and not just use people randomly and ignore elected members. Because I've got so many people who are coming to me and saying, "Can you help?" So I'd like that raised to them as well.
Yeah.
What I want to do, I don't really want to get sort of stuck into each individual sort of housing issue. We know we've got a problem with the Ombudsman report, so let's sort of try and stick to that, getting someone in. So, Councillor Cook.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to propose, it's very difficult for us to discuss this having not seen the Ombudsman special report. I would think it would be really interesting for us to see that, also to get a report on the meeting that Councillor Bayliss and Councillor Oliver have tomorrow, and then convene and put together so that we can all then ask particular and specific questions of the people who are going to come in, and we can talk to them then. I think that would be a lot more helpful. So I would like to propose that we add this at some stage to our work programme.
Yeah, and hopefully soon. We'll discuss the work programme next, where we can adjust. Mark, Councillor Legg.
Thanks. It's obvious that Southern are not doing their job very well, and listening to what Lorna's just said, that it seems to me that if there is a way of monitoring their progress on their action plan, that would be a very, very good start.
Yeah, just on that, I might disagree with you actually a little bit, Paul. I think the principle of pulling Southern Housing in here on a quarterly basis, certainly while we're monitoring their improvement strategy, would be something that I would very much support. And just in a general sense about the problems with Southern Housing, I would certainly see the issue of how their whole business is sort of predicated on the use of outsourcing contractors. There is a real lack of ownership of the repairs that are done, and where problems are complex and you have a series of contractors coming in, there's no ownership of the work, and the work is frequently needing to be repeated, including delays in between. So, I would certainly want to see Southern Housing in here on a quarterly basis, if possible. Thank you.
Quarterly basis would be pushing it up, wouldn't it? Anyway, Councillor McGurk.
Thanks. Yeah, just to agree with Councillor Delaney's point, if we can get them in more frequently, and I'd like to see them in July. Really, I think we're looking at systemic. I think, like we mentioned before, the next overview and scrutiny committee, if we could have them in on July's meeting, that would be really positive. We're looking at systemic issues with the provider, like various people have mentioned. Their attitude to complaints is really indicative, because if you've got a functioning organisation, you want to learn from your complaints. You want to engage. That's the first place you engage with the problems as they arise. And if you're not doing that, and the Ombudsman's report demonstrates that they're not doing that, then that is a big issue, because that's a rich source of information about where you're getting it wrong. If you're not using that, then they're not paying attention when it really, really matters, and that is a systemic, and it's a serious systemic issue.
Councillor Clark.
Yeah, I don't want to extend this too long, but it didn't matter Amicus Horizon, Orbit, or Southern Housing. They're very difficult to deal with because we don't own the properties now. When I first got on the council, we actually owned the housing stock, and it was very easy to get repair done. You just rung a number, and the guy used to turn and do it. They deal with us councillors at arm's length. That's another thing. That's another issue. I've had problems in my ward where they've not replied to my emails. I've written letters into them and not been answered. Or 2 months later, I've got a letter from some guy in Sittingbourne who said, thank you for what you said. We are aware of it. We're speaking to the tenant. I said, well, then will you give me updates of what you're actually doing? Never get any updates. So they talk to councils as a courtesy, but they don't allow you to get involved or get feedback. And the amount of cases I did in my ward in Pevsham, it got so bad that the Ombudsman made them pay out compensation to the tenants in money terms, because they were so upset at the way the tenants been treated. And there don't seem to be, they've all got these different names and titles, but there doesn't seem to be a strong customer service division that deals with complaints, links them to that tenant, so there's an ongoing conversation. You know, it's so fragmented, and they just, from my point of view, I'm pretty persistent. They just run me around in circles. You know, not replying and not emailing me, everything, not keeping me in the book, in the picture. You know, so they've certainly got an issue with the way they deal with tenants. There's no doubt about it.
Thank you. Can I ask you, did you say, Christine, you was meeting someone tomorrow with the leader? So you've heard the conversation now, so you've got a bit more armoury, if you like, some more weapon. I'm just trying to sort of think of a way forward. Yes, we can. Yeah, we need someone in here from the feelings. Do we sort of do that on a? You know, do we try and put it into the committee structure, or do we just say, well, we have to have an extra meeting? You know, but we can work that out when we get to next item, which is the work programme. So we can work that out, can't we? Terry.
Thank you, Chairman. When I was Cabinet Member for Housing, there are two regular quarterly meetings. One is the Residents' Panel, which is Southern Housing are very bad at canvassing for residents to come forward. What you tend to get is for each block, the man that mows the lawns, or he comments on the progress he's made on the conifer he planted in the corner of the lawn. And as Councillor Clark said, when you go to the management meeting, it's like trying to nail a jelly to the wall. I tried and tried to come up with some way of measuring. And in my previous comments, I told you that they present 98% of this is good and 94% of that is bad. And it's almost a wall you can't go through. So I don't just want to carry on beating them up, but I think we need to look at the structure of those two meetings. I personally think that Councillor McCourtin is the right person in the right place to attend those, but maybe with a brief from ourselves, maybe after the first one, as to how those meetings should go, and to try and look at some better metrics than the ones they've got at the moment, which seem to hide the problems rather than highlight the problems. And that's something I think a council can do. Southern Housing continually hide behind the financial imperative. And they are up against it. The government is giving them some targets that they can't meet whilst there's no way they're going to update and retrofit properties to a proper standard while still maintaining customer service for their existing properties. Now, we can't do anything about that, but hopefully if we can pressure them in a structured way, not just beat them up, but try and give them some ammunition to take further up the chain. So there are two meetings. I think we can carry on with those. How often we want them in front of this committee with all people fired, we'd be in danger of doing the same as they did to me, which is firing from so many angles. It's difficult to come up with an action plan. So I personally would like to see Councillor McCourt coming back to us with how he feels the meetings could be moved and anything we could then do to support future actions.
There we go forward with that. Let's say that we happily get someone in if we need to. There's a meeting tomorrow where we can get further updates from after that. The strength of feeling in the room will obviously be passed on via Councillor Bayliss and the leader and Rory. So I don't think there's much else we can say on this one, is there, for now? We need some feedback. But if we go in, so if we say yes on that, that's what we can do. If we go on to the work programme now, you'll remember we had the sort of online meeting to sort of go through some considerations and everything else. We've got various task and finish groups up and running at the moment. Housing development task strategy, task and finish group, local enforcement plan, task and finish group, digital and customer services strategy, and we've got some health and wellbeing board update. Yeah, that's not us, is it? That's not us, is it?
Yes.
It is. Oh yeah, health and wellbeing task and finish group. Yeah. So we're pretty task and finish grouped up. So if we look at the work programme, so the July meeting at this moment in time looks pretty full up, but we can adjust stuff if we need to. Now, one thing that Andrew would like is a item each month on the savings strategy. Do you want to explain any of that, Andrew?
Thank you. It's just to for you to monitor progress against savings that were in the budget this year, and to give you the assurance that officers have taken the actions necessary to deliver those savings in advance of budget monitoring reports coming out later that will show the financial results of that. But the first report would be to say people have put in place the measures needed to deliver those savings. So you're really acting as a sort of assurance on the budget.
I'm not sure if Anna was going to mention this or not, but Anna's been working on something called the Productivity Plan, which was a recent request from the government that we answer a number of questions. So I'm going to hand over to Anna to talk about the detail of it, but it has a timetable attached to it, and this is sort of quite new to us, so we haven't quite worked out how we're going to deal with it. We've been finding out more information about it, but it is clear it needs some kind of member sign-off, and we think that Overview and Scrutiny Committee is probably the place for a report like that to come. I have got some good news, though. The corporate plan consultation, which is down for July, is going to go to September, so that helps a tiny bit. But Anna, do you want to talk a little bit about that report, because it is quite time-bound, isn't it?
Yeah, first of all, apologies. As Lorna said, this is a bit of an unusual one. We've been asked by DLUC to complete a productivity report, and every local authority in the country has been asked to do a productivity plan, and it covers quite a lot of different things. Obviously, how productive you are, what your lobbying priorities are, and we have to get this back within about the next month, 6 weeks. And it looks like the only committee that it could go to for proper scrutiny is the one on the 8th of July. I'm still doing the report at the moment. It requires a lot of collaborative working from all service managers, and it asks a lot of questions. I'll do anything to avoid making your workload really heavy, but I think it might have to come to the July one. We have to synthesise it into about 5 pages. So it will be, appendices and probably like a covering report. I think it will be useful once we've done it, and it has to be published once it's approved.
Okay. Can I ask, how is the digital and customer services task and finish group going? Is that ready to
It's ready to bring to Overview and Scrutiny.
So that's ready. So we don't want to lose that then, do we? Don't want to move that. Active Robber Partnership. Any news or thoughts on Active Robber Partnership?
I think that is due to report. We thought it was a good idea to bring that report with the Health and Wellbeing Board update and the Task and Finish group and kind of have a bit of a focus on health and wellbeing. I remember us talking about that, but it does create quite a hefty agenda. Especially if we've got southern housing as well, as Lisa points out. Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. What it's sort of double-edged sword. You don't want a 3-hour meeting, but equally, southern housing if they're this bad, then it needs as soon as. But to a degree, where hands are tied, because there could be some movement tomorrow, which satisfies in the short term, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Vicky?
Chair, we also did have notification from Mr Ben Hook that he wanted to bring the SIL policy to us as well. So perhaps we could move the review of progress against the recommendations of health and wellbeing from the Task and Finish group from the Health and Wellbeing Board and Active Rother Partnership Strategy, and take those to another meeting, because all three do go well together, as you said. And that would take three things out of that particular meeting that we could slot in: Andrew's report on the financial savings, the Southern Housing, as well as Anna's report that she needs to bring to us.
Yeah. So could they? Would that wait until? Would that wait until October? It's a long time.
Yeah, I don't think there are any consequences, but we can find out and report back.
Yeah. Well, I think it'd be worth looking at. We've got Andrew wants us to look at savings. That's similar to your DLUC productivity. So that's so those two tie together. Nicely. Ben wants us to look at SIL, and that's probably sooner. Is that right, Teresa? You want that looked at sort of July, right? Yeah. Yeah. Simon?
I think someone mentioned earlier on having a bespoke meeting, having a specific meeting to meet Southern Housing, to convene the committee. That may be an option. I don't know what members feel about that. I wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I think the thing is, we've got to get someone down here, and they're not sitting at home waiting for our phone call, are they? They're busy people, the same as anyone else. So I think, if we want to, we'll see what happens tomorrow. I think we'll see what happens tomorrow. See what the feeling is. If the leader, I should be at cabinet next week. Maybe I can see Doug or someone can, and Christine. Then we can sort of work out from there, really, the agenda, can't we? And if that date doesn't work for someone from Southern Housing, then we'll find another date. And if we have to come over, or even if we do a Teams, can't we? I suppose it's not the end of the world.
Just thinking, I mean, we do have the member briefing process too. Now, that doesn't replace it coming formally to Overview and Scrutiny Committee at some point in the future, but perhaps if we want a more immediate discussion with Southern Housing, a member briefing might be a route to something to throw into the mix.
It could be a plan, because then it gets everybody online.
And it's informal.
And it's sort of it's a bit more informal, so you can bend here if you like. It might be quicker. What I don't want to do is sort of drag it out, and all of a sudden you're looking at October, and if people have got water coming through the ceilings and the rest of it, you want to give grief now, don't you?
There is something about the governance attached to Overview and Scrutiny and the sort of import that we place on it that I think it would fit with us. If we're talking about a member briefing for Southern Housing, it's sort of it's a briefing doesn't necessarily imply scrutiny.
No,
do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Just to be clear, I don't think it replaces the need for a formal report to come here, but our programme is pretty packed, and we want to, I imagine, understand what's going on here and now. So that might be a way of addressing some immediate concerns and having a report back a bit later in the year.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, it might be an idea. That could be an idea, or we just have to have an extra meeting. Yeah, because if you've got a standalone meeting, the sort of current programme is fed into feed into the cabinet meetings and the structure and everything else and the court reports. So that's why that's the dates. But if you've got a single item, then you could to push as long as there's room in the town hall. Staff want to come in. Yeah, no. August is a no. So, yeah, shall we leave it? Yeah, let's see what comes out tomorrow on Southern Housing. Let's see what comes out tomorrow, and then we can go from there. And then we know. So have we decided that these three, the review of the Health and Wellbeing Task Force, Health and Wellbeing Board and Active Rother move to make space for Anna's DLUC and Andrew's new one, which ties up with that, and Ben's, that keep Teresa on side, move those three to October, Lisa, Does your medium-term financial strategy is not going to be super mega, is it? I don't know yet, he says. Depends if there's any money left. Because we don't get those very often, do we? So
once a year.
Yeah, so I'm sure we can do that. Yeah, we can do that. Okay, right. Happy? Cool. Thanks for your attendance. Meeting closed. 7 minutes past 8. Thank you very much.